On the night of September the 27th, 2005, Brett Kebble was driving his silver Mercedes-Benz through the quiet streets of Johannesburg. He was on his way to a meeting he thought was important, a meeting he thought would help fix everything. But then, disaster struck. Were fired, the car slowed down, and just like that, Brett Kebble was gone. His shocked the country, but what came next was even more shocking. This is the story of mining boss Brett Kebble. Brett Kebble was born on February 19, 1964, in the quiet mining town of Springs, located in the Gauteng province of South Africa. From the beginning, he was surrounded by the world of mining. His father, Roger Kebble, was a seasoned mining engineer whose life revolved around goldfields, shafts, and deep underground operations. It was from this environment that Brett's early exposure to the mining world began to shape his perspective on business, wealth, and power. Brett grew up in a disciplined household. Roger, his father, was known to be a stern man, someone who believed in the importance of hard work and persistence. While not overly affectionate, he was deeply committed to providing his family with a future built on determination and ambition. This mindset rubbed off on Brett from a young age. Brett later attended St. Andrew's School in Bloemfontein, a respected institution known for discipline and leadership. There, he refined not just his academic skills, but also his ability to network, persuade, and influence. He was not just another student in a uniform. Brett had charisma. It was at St. Andrews that he began to see the value of combining intellect with strategy, two qualities that would define much of his future career. After finishing high school, Brett made his way to Cape Town, enrolling at the prestigious University of Cape Town. He pursued a law degree, graduating in 1986. His decision to study law wasn't random. Brett was interested in systems of power, how deals were made, how companies operated, and how legal frameworks shaped wealth and ownership. He completed his legal articles at a respected Cape Town law firm called Malinix, gaining valuable experience in corporate law. But the suits and legal briefs weren't where his heart was. Brett wasn't built for courtroom battles or quiet office life. He had his sights set on something much bigger. By 1991, he had made a major shift in his career. Stepping away from law, he joined his father in the mining industry, working closely with Roger to acquire a controlling stake in Rand Lease's gold mining. This marked the beginning of Brett's deep involvement in South Africa's gold sector. From this moment on, he wasn't just a lawyer, he was a player in the world of mining, a world filled with risk, power, and enormous financial reward. After stepping into the mining world alongside his father, Brett Kebble wasted no time making his presence known. He wasn't content with simply managing existing assets. He had bigger ambitions, and he moved through the industry with boldness and speed that many admired and others feared. By the early 1990s, South Africa's mining sector was in a period of transformation. Apartheid had ended, and a new era of business was emerging, one that encouraged the inclusion of Black South Africans in ownership and leadership roles. Brett saw both the opportunity and the pressure that came with this shift, and he positioned himself right at the center of it. In 1994, just 1 year after the country's first democratic elections, Brett pulled off one of his most audacious moves. He engineered a hostile takeover of Rand Gold and Exploration, a mining company with significant assets and influence. This aggressive acquisition sent a message across the boardrooms of Johannesburg. Brett Kebble was a force to be reckoned with. He wasn't afraid to play hardball, and he knew how to take control of the narrative. Only a year later, in 1995, Brett made headlines again. This time, he teamed up with businessman Mintsi Khumalo, a prominent figure in the Black economic empowerment movement. Together, they acquired a controlling stake in Johannesburg Consolidated Investments, or JCI. This was not just a business move. It was a calculated step into the national conversation around transformation and inclusion. Brett's partnership with Khumalo allowed him to tap into new networks while securing support from those in political and economic circles who believed in the importance of empowering Black South Africans. From there, Brett's empire began to grow rapidly. His business interests reached into several mid-sized mining firms, including Rand Gold Resources, Consolidated African Mines, Harmony Gold, Western Areas, and Durban Roodepoort Deep, often referred to as Durban Deep. Each of these companies added a new layer to his growing influence in the mining world. But Brett wasn't just collecting companies. He was trying to reshape the industry from within, and in doing so, he made both powerful allies and dangerous enemies. Among his biggest ventures was his leadership role in Western areas, one of the most ambitious projects of his career. Under his watch, the company went ahead with a massive deal, a 4 billion rand acquisition of the South Deep gold mine, a move that, if successful, would have further cemented Brett's place among the top mining executives in the country. To make the deal possible, Brett's team sold a half interest in the South Deep project to a rival company. Additionally, they employed a risky financial strategy known as hedging. Essentially, they sold the future production of gold at a fixed price to secure capital up front. It was a gamble. If gold prices fell, they would profit. But if gold prices rose, they would be stuck selling gold below market value. At the time, Brett was confident. He believed in the plan, but the market had other ideas. Soon after the hedging agreements were locked in, the price of gold began to climb steadily. What should have been a windfall for Western areas turned into a financial disaster. The company was forced to sell gold at prices far below the market, losing millions in potential profit. Investors grew angry. Boardroom tensions flared. Brett's reputation, once associated with bold brilliance, began to suffer under the weight of bad debt and failed promises. The South Deep fiasco was a turning point. It exposed the fragility of Brett's empire and opened the door to questions about his financial dealings. What had once been seen as a rising star was now surrounded by controversy. And while Brett still held on to power, the foundation beneath him was beginning to crack. But as history would show, his troubles were only just beginning. As a powerful businessman in South Africa, he understood that fostering strong political relationships was essential for securing favorable conditions for his companies. His association with the ANC, especially in the Western Cape, was marked by his significant financial contributions to the party. This was at a time when the ANC was solidifying its power in the post-apartheid era, and the political landscape was undergoing massive shifts. The most notable aspect of Kebble's political involvement was his support for the ANC Youth League. His backing went beyond donations. He provided the kind of financial muscle that helped propel political careers. It was reported that Kebble was not only a financier of the party, but was also believed to be a member of the ANC himself, further entrenching his place in the political circles of South Africa. One of the figures most associated with Kebble was Jacob Zuma, who would go on to become South Africa's president. The connection between Kebble and Zuma was significant. Zuma's political career was marked by complex relationships with business figures, and Kebble's financial support was seen as a key component of the backing Zuma needed during his rise. While the specifics of their relationship remained murky, the two shared a bond that was both personal and professional. In addition to his financial backing of the ANC Youth League, Kebble's wealth and resources allowed him to finance various other political endeavors. His contributions were not limited to just the youth wing, but extended throughout the party's structures, particularly in the Western Cape, where his influence was most noticeable. Many saw his financial contributions as an investment, one that would pay dividends through favorable business conditions and political influence. However, Kebble's political support also raised eyebrows. Many wondered whether his donations were a way to buy political power, securing protection and favor in a competitive and sometimes cutthroat environment. The line between patronage and influence peddling was often blurred, and allegations of corruption and unethical practices began to surround his name. While these allegations were not always proven, they added to the sense of intrigue and suspicion that enveloped his business dealings. As Brett Kebble's empire grew, so did the financial and legal complications that would eventually lead to his downfall. By August 2005, the cracks in Brett Kebble's business empire were impossible to ignore. Serious allegations of financial irregularities and corporate mismanagement surfaced, shaking the foundations of the companies he had once controlled with ease. Kebble's business empire included some of South Africa's most significant mining companies, such as Western Areas, JCI, and Randgold and Exploration. These companies were not just prominent in South Africa, but also made their mark internationally. However, the situation took a drastic turn when it became clear that these companies were facing deep financial troubles. To keep them afloat, a condition was set for Kebble to step down from his leadership roles. It was a humiliating blow for a man who had built his empire on the back of aggressive business strategies and a reputation for bold decision-making. At the heart of these troubles were serious discrepancies in the financial records of the companies. Among the most shocking revelations was the disappearance of 14.4 million shares in Randgold Resources. The missing shares were part of a larger scandal that saw Randgold and Exploration, one of Kebble's flagship companies, suspended from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE. The company was also delisted from the Nasdaq stock market, a severe blow to its international credibility. The suspension followed the failure of the company to publish its 2004 financial results, raising serious concerns about the integrity of its operations. The legal fallout from these financial irregularities was swift and severe. Kebble found himself facing a series of charges related to fraud and the contravention of the Stock Exchanges Control Act. The South African National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, was preparing to take action against him, and it was clear that his legal troubles were only beginning. The damage to his reputation was far-reaching, affecting not only his business interests, but also his political and philanthropic connections. The same people who had once praised him for his contributions to the South African economy and society were now distancing themselves from him, unsure of what would come next. For Kebble, this period marked the beginning of his rapid decline from the heights of his empire to the depths of legal and financial ruin. As the walls closed in on him, the once charismatic and influential businessman found himself increasingly isolated. His once impressive network of allies began to unravel as more information surfaced about the state of his finances and the questionable practices within his companies. By 2005, Kebble's legal troubles had reached a boiling point. He was facing imminent prosecution, and the prospect of spending time in prison was becoming a very real possibility. The pressures of these ongoing investigations weighed heavily on him, and to make matters worse, a massive disaster was about to strike. On September 27, 2005, Brett Kebble was driving through the streets of Johannesburg en route to a dinner meeting with his business associate, Sello Rasataba. Still reeling from his recent business and legal troubles, Kebble was unaware that this would be the last drive of his life. As he passed a bridge over the M1 highway in Abbotsford, Johannesburg, his car was ambushed by assailants. Multiple shots rang out, hitting Kebble in what would later be described as a brutal execution. The circumstances surrounding his however, were shrouded in mystery from the very start. The choice of weapon used to take his life led to immediate speculation that this was no ordinary. Forensic investigations revealed that Kebble had been with low-velocity ammunition, a type of typically used by security personnel or bodyguards. This particular ammunition is not commonly found in the hands of criminals, but is rather a tool associated with professional, well-trained operatives, suggesting that his had knowledge of security tactics and access to specialized weaponry. This raised an unsettling question. Was this a random act of violence, or did it have the markings of a carefully planned hit? Those who knew Kebble, as well as the media and investigators, quickly began to connect the dots between his and the intense legal and financial pressures he had been facing in the months prior. The fact that appeared so methodical, coupled with the nature of the ammunition used, seemed to suggest that the was not just the result of a spontaneous altercation or a robbery gone wrong. Rather, it hinted at a deeper, more complex motive, one that involved more than just a disgruntled individual. Adding to the intrigue was the fact that Kebble had been on his way to meet Sello Rasataba, a business associate. Rasataba was known to have had close ties to Kebble's mining operations, and the two had discussed several high-stakes deals in the months leading up to the Was Kebble's related to internal business conflicts, or was it the result of darker, more personal motivations? Some speculated that his was orchestrated by those he had wronged in the business world, people who stood to gain from his sudden removal. Others pointed to the possibility of a political connection, given Kebble's close ties with influential figures in the African National Congress, ANC, and his involvement in various controversial financial deals. The timing of his also raised eyebrows. Kebble was facing prosecution for a series of financial irregularities and fraud charges, and he had recently been ousted from the companies he had once controlled. Some theorists speculated that his could have been the final act in an ongoing power struggle, a move orchestrated by those seeking to eliminate a once powerful figure who had become a liability. As the investigation into his unfolded, questions continued to mount. Why had the been carried out so professionally, and who stood to benefit the most from his demise? Had the financial and legal battles he faced pushed him into dangerous territory, where he made enemies that would stop at nothing to protect their own interests? The police were quick to investigate, but answers were slow to come. Kebble's had all the hallmarks of a well-planned assassination, and many suspected that there were powerful individuals behind it who had the means, motive, and opportunity to ensure that Brett Kebble's story would end in a violent and mysterious way. To this day, the full truth of who ordered the hit on Brett Kebble remains unknown. His continues to be one of South Africa's most high-profile and unsolved killings. What started as a business mogul's rise to power and wealth ended in a tragic, mysterious that continues to haunt the mining industry and the broader South African business community. The assassination of Brett Kebble remains an enigma, an unresolved chapter in the history of South Africa's corporate and political elite.